Pension Playpen before. He's been in the industry a long time. People know who he is. But Simon, you might like just to say a few words about where you're coming from on this, and then perhaps answer a question which you put to me, which is you wanted me to put to you, which is why don't people like financial advice? You say only 8% of people are actually taking financial advice. Why don't more people take it? Yeah. Okay, so over to you, Simon.
Yeah, first of all, can I say thank you to everybody for attending? And Ian Beeston, is that you suggesting that I need to be plain speaking today? I do like your sense of humour. And thanks for allowing me to be the last person in 2023. I'm also pleased to see people looking a little bit dressed down, because I saw Henry come on in a shirt and tie and thought, oh no, I'm wearing a hoodie. How's that going to work? Overall today, I'd love to think that I knew all the answers as well as all the questions, and life's taught me that I don't. So for me, these are best if they're as participative as possible. So jump in whenever, ask questions, give me answers that I can use, because I haven't got them myself. That's always a good thing. And I look forward to a good gossip and chat about how we can help people and support people over the course of the next hour, perhaps.
Okay, so to that question, why do only 8% of people take financial advice, Simon?
Oh, start with a killer question, Henry. Obviously, the FCA themselves give a number of reasons for that. But fundamentally, the two that really stood out to me was they don't think they need it, and that they can make many of the decisions that they need to make themselves, and they don't want to pay for it. I'm not entirely sure that the populations have been really driven into by the FCA there, because I remember being on one of these presentations some time ago where we were listening to the outputs of some work that had been done by Lancat, where they talked about a survey that they had done on individuals that worked with financial advisors, and within that survey there was quite a good population and quite a lot of trust that was put into the financial advisors by their clients. I think what's quite interesting for me is almost there's a redrawing of the lines as to who might be considered to need financial advice. And I'm always very aware that when I started in this industry back in the late 1980s, it was now, that many people who I worked with as an administrator on the Teachers' Pension Scheme, they didn't need financial advice in the same way as they might do going forward, because particularly when it came to pensions, they were typically in final salary schemes for the vast majority of their career. They had the state pension scheme, and they were able to get themselves onto the property ladder at that stage. So you had this whole population of individuals who almost, as they went through life, benefited from what was called a cradle to grave support program introduced from the 1948 Beveridge Act. So I see Paul's already stuck his mitt up there with a particular question or comment, so I'll cede the floor.
Yeah, Paul, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Really looking forward to this. On the question of why only 8% of people take advice, so many reasons, aren't there, that, as you're stating there. And yeah, absolutely, as Billy's just said, that, you know, the complexity of the environment, the tax system, the la. But I just want to add one thought. We've got a trend these days in the industry of people trying to become finfluencers and telling the public that this is all simple. And if you tell someone something simple, they're not going to want to pay for it, are they? So I think we've gone down the wrong track here by telling people things are simple. And I'm working on particular educational pieces at the moment, which is telling the public that it's not simple and that you need advice. So I'll just add that thought in.
Thank you, Paul. All right, back to you, Simon.
Again, I would tend to agree that sometimes as an industry we can communicate in a way that disengages individuals. It is complicated. sometimes it needs to be. Sometimes the issues are complicated. One of the things that I think we can benefit from and we don't always realise, and particularly as a firm who focuses its work via the workplace, is lots of people that come to talk to us don't really understand what financial advice or guidance or support or any of those things are. And actually, whereas I was always taught that trust is earned and not given, very often I find that it's given and not earned, given, not earned, and lost when you do it wrong. And actually, we have an opportunity, in my view, to reframe people's understanding of what we do and why we can help. And that doesn't just mean helping, giving them advice and charging them some money to give them that advice, to reframe their understanding of what it is we do and why we do it. Because we've engaged with over 40,000 people as a firm since 2015. And if there's one thing that comes through, particularly in the written responses we get from people, they don't understand what we do. They don't understand they have no idea of what their expectations should be. So you can sometimes give a very poor service and someone thinks it's wonderful. And then another time you can give an exceptional service and someone thinks it isn't what it needed to be. So I would almost say to us as a sector, maybe we can find a way to engage with consumers that allows them to feel like we're approachable, because I'm not always sure we are approachable. And I think in a world where we are advantaged because individuals who come to access our service, they typically they're compelled to do so, or they get tax advantages from doing so, we still only have 8% of people wanting to talk to us, which is pretty low when you consider the advantages that we start with. I'm not sure that answers the question directly, but I'm not sure there's a magic answer.
Maybe more than 8% want to talk to you. Maybe more. Some of them just simply don't trust what would happen if they did. That was a question which came up before, but there seemed to be a trust deficit. And if you look at the comments, which are often in after articles written about financial advice, they're full of vitriol, really, about their experience of financial advisors and so on and so on. Now, this can't be helpful to the cause, but there does seem to be a trust deficit. And I think your question wasn't why do 88% of people take advice, which is my question, but your question was why do people not trust financial advisors? And could you build on that? I mean, it may be that they just don't know what they're doing, or it may be that they've got genuine cause for grievance. I don't know which it is.
Well, I think I want to break it into two different constituencies, because I am very aware of the Landcat research, and I believe in that something like 60 to 80% of individuals that worked consistently with financial advisors did place an awful lot of trust in that financial advisor. And I think it's very clear we've got what I would consider to be a mature marketplace, which is individuals who go looking for advice. And we've got an immature marketplace, which are people that don't go looking because either they don't think they need it or they don't trust it. Henry, you and Al Rush were heavily involved in unpicking one of the most significant scandals of our time, the British Steel pension scheme. And it would be hard for any individual who was seeing what happened there, including a recent article in the Daily Mail about one of the main protagonists and living at his house but saying he wasn't, and being married and saying he wasn't, and the way that they did business. I think it would be very hard for any individual to look at what we do and think, can these people be trusted? Because I don't see any headlines saying brilliant financial advisor helps loads of consumers. I don't see those headlines. The headlines you see are the times that things go wrong. So I think, again, for me, it's about finding a way to engage with people that takes into account the good, the bad, the indifferent, but most importantly, frameworks the way that we talk to them in a way that they understand. I will see, I'm the same. I'm influenced or infected by the industry. I've been doing this for over 30 years now, and I talk in a certain way because I'm used to talking in a certain way for the vast majority of the work that I do. And actually, if we accept that trust is often given and then lost, then that's a good start point for us. So overall, and I know the Consumer Duty Alliance via their task force are trying to do this, it's almost finding that spot where you can engage with an individual and they feel that they can talk to a regular person, somebody like them, And I'm not surprised at the FCA language about, you know, one of the potential regimes, which is people like you, you know, in that sort of sense. And that's, if you think about it, when you go into a social environment and you talk to somebody, it's more likely that you're going to end up talking to somebody who shares your interests, who shares your characteristics, who communicates in a similar way to you. So for me, in terms of that, both can financial advisors be trusted and the future of advice in the advisory space, they all come into this engagement area. How do we learn what our actual potential customers, what consumers want from us, and how do we find a way to talk to them where we even learn it in the first place?
Yeah. Okay. Anyone want to come in at this stage? Okay, I'll move on. Simon, do you think that the FCA's advice guidance boundary document, FS, whatever it is, the 23.2 thing, which came out last week, is going to help, or is it just going to make things worse? I've heard both arguments.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start off with just help Ian with speaking plainly, and I actually think as an industry, we have so many people that are always trying to help, and I'm proud of us as an industry. What I think is that it's a bit like consumer duty. The fact that a regulator feels that they need to intervene in this way doesn't speak well of us. I almost think that actually the principles that they're setting out, that we should make support accessible, affordable, and understandable, I don't think any one of us would have disagreed with that. I couldn't have come up with those conclusions ourselves in that sense. So for me, I think an FCA or a pensions regulator or the DWP, they set a framework for us, right? But the individuals who are responsible for delivering it for good or for bad are actually us. We are those individuals. We are the people that have the opportunity there. So whether or not you think it's a bad thing or a good thing, I think it's a responsible thing to be actually able to take the principles anyway, even without a regulator telling you should have those principles, and try and deliver that environment. Because if you're not doing this job to help people, then why are you doing it? If it's for bad reasons, then I don't want you in the industry, in truth. But we're all trying to help.
You're getting very sort of philosophical about it. Very specifically, yeah, on the proposals the FCA have put forward, simplified advice, targeted support. Do you think that those specific measures are going to be helpful, or do you think they're going to make things worse?
I think they're going to be helpful, and I'm a big supporter of it, in the same way as I was a big supporter of consumer duty. But I think whether or not they turn out to be helpful or not doesn't depend on the FCA. It depends on how we take it forward as an industry.
Okay. And how do you see the proposals as actually helping?
I think anything that creates a framework that allows people to trust the environment that they're accessing, that makes it cheaper, quicker, more accessible, is a good start in any consultation, right? You made the point at the very beginning, Henry, and I'll call you back on it. Only 8% of people are engaging. We talk about an advice gap. I don't see people knocking down my firm's door seeking advice with menaces. It's not happening. And in that circumstance, I'm always going to support something that says help people make informed choices, support them in doing so. Don't just look at it as a charging opportunity. What we do is philosophical, right? What we do, if it's about helping, it's always going to be philosophical. And the really talented people that I've worked with or seen operate in this area in my life, they are naturally good people who always find a way to help, who follow this golden rule of interpretation that almost say, it doesn't really matter how you want to interpret the written word in this segment or in this segment. It's what the intention of that document was, is how we drive to it. And I encourage that philosophical approach, and that because I actually think getting into the literal interpretation of it can blind us to what it is that we're really trying to do. So from that perspective, I enjoy engaging with the FCA. I'm scared of them. in the job that I do, obviously you need to be very aware of them. But I have never had a situation where we've engaged with the FCA and we've made points as it influences regulation that they're proposing or consultations, where they haven't gone away and taken that into account. I'm sure there are other people that are on this call or live this life that have had the same experience. The ones that haven't are usually the ones that have done something that are not appropriate and got the FCA knocking on their doors really hard, which is something I think anybody would prefer to avoid.
Okay, but I mean, if I see, say, Martin Lewis's website, Money Saving Expert, when Martin makes a statement about something like, how do you pay extra to get extra years of your more class 3 NICs, let's say, to get extra state pension. Yeah, there are loads and loads of questions which come, and there's answers, and there's toing and there's throwing. Should I take my tax-free cash? Which is the best answer? All these kind of things. There's a kind of targeted support that comes from Martin's team, and people really do beat a path to his door. So there must be a market out there. And I know there is, for people who are hoping to get help on everything from annual allowance right the way through to, should I take my tax-free cash? Loads of questions which are really hard for people to understand, like what is an annuity or whatever. Who's there answering those kind of questions? Is it the IFA or is it somebody else? Where do you sit in that continuum?
Right. I think, first off, I absolutely agree with the point with Martin Lewis. And actually, the Consumer Duty Task Force that we'll talk about in January approached Martin and his team directly to try and get them involved in that initiative on behalf of consumers because of the power that Martin Lewis brings to the debate. Let's not for one moment underestimate, if you look at trust being given and then kept and earned, Martin Lewis and his team, they're an example of it, right? And I would turn around and say, is there an equivalent right now of a Martin Lewis or a body within our industry that has that impact? Absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. Is there a need for it? Hell yes, right? I would love to see that develop and I would love to see it evolve. But I would say that one of the main reasons that we sought to engage with Martin Lewis and his team is I think we've got a lot of learning to do in how to talk to regular people to be able to provide that support. I think we mainly talk to ourselves, right? We talk in a way we understand and we're comfortable with. And I can see Billy's got his hand up as well, Henry. So
yeah, I can see that too. But I want to know why. What did Martin Lewis say when you approached him?
They had a good look, and in the end, they chose not to engage because they had other priorities.
Okay,
right.
Billy. Do you want to unmute, Billy, and ask your question?
Hello. You mentioned Martin Lewis, and I was. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. You mentioned Martin Lewis, and I was really interested in something. I said this correctly, but he was sort of saying that he finds it very stressful and sort of mentally has some dark moments, the responsibility of all the time having to make sure he gets things right, and if he says something and it's wrong and people act, and I think this is part of the whole advice bit that goes underreported and not misunderstood. And I don't want to sort of overplay this, but other advisors may want to chip in here, but you do a really good job for people and then they come back and kick you in the face, and it can be really stressful. And what you have is a series of rules from the FCA that are very prescriptive, and they just don't understand the whole behavioral side of this and the stress and strain that goes with doing the job properly. And maybe that's something that we should put into the equation. And it's not only advisors, it's clients. I've seen clients get very stressed emotionally about these things, and perhaps it's time to start talking about that as well as all the process stuff.
I mean, the British Steel people have got no compensation at the moment because of the way gilt yields have worked and so on. And they're actually going to FOS and saying, why aren't we getting compensation for the stress that we've been put under from the bad advice we've had over the last 6 years? They don't get a single penny for that, which is really interesting for that particular aspect and I totally agree with you, Billy, but that particular aspect of financial advice is massively underplayed. The responsibility we have for de-stressing clients. I see my good friend Catherine Lockyer on the call. How lovely to see you, Catherine. And you might want to come in at some stage, because I know First Actuarial, along with a lot of other people, provide a hell of a lot of targeted support to people who are taking their pensions, and I'd be interested to hear it from the non-advised side too. But sorry, Simon, I'm cutting you out.
I think I welcome that approach, because there's a specific section in the document that you referred to, Henry, that talks about the role of trustees, and of course that encompasses the role of those wider individuals who support trustees, and I do think that's important. And I think back to my time as a pension scheme administrator at Teachers Pensions when I was just starting out, and I was a pretty poor administrator because I'm not organised enough and I've got a creative brain, and you've got to be really organised to do that job properly. But I loved helping people. And I remember having conversations where people would say, tell me what to do. Cough once, it means this, and cough twice, it means that. And you're saying, I can't cough, from that sort. But it shows how much people need your help and how much they want to feel that they could trust you, and how you take that forward. But I want to go back to Billy's point on stress. I call stress passion, Billy, right? And that passion to help people, in my experience, I'm not an easy person to deal with because it comes bubbling out, right? There's no stopping it. But actually that passion to help people is the thing that I find that people attach to the most, because they want to trust you, right? They've got to get the signals that say that they can trust you. And so from that sort of perspective, the people that are stressed are the people that care. Right, the individual consumer cares about the outcome, and you, Billy, care about delivering that outcome, and it's all about care. And I actually think we talked at the beginning about making it complicated. I tell you what makes it not complicated. We care about giving you the best, we care about you, and we care about helping you with your future. Talk to us, right? We don't need 20 million pages of caveats or 11,000 pages of FCA COBS regulation, which is the latest estimate. Right? What we almost need to just turn around and say, look, we've got these rule books, we have to interpret them and abide by them. They're there for your best interest. But actually, what do? We care about you, and we want to help you to get where you're going. Simple as that, right? And we're only going to do it if you understand what we say, right?
Okay, Simon.
And if you don't understand what we say, tell us.
Simon, I would like to come back to something you said earlier, actually, question on it, because you said one of the things that people find very hard is how to engage with financial advisors. And I've actually saw it being written this morning in some article I read on CityWire, that we almost need to have courses in how it is that we actually engage with financial advisors, because we don't know how to do it. That sort of ties in with the public don't know what we do, and they really ought to. Do you think that there's some kind of educational program that needs to be out there which actually teaches people why they need financial advice, or do you think that comes naturally?
The first thing I'm going to do is I avoid using the term education because it starts me off on a rant.
Well, don't use it, because I don't like the island.
Okay.
Sorry,
because I actually think as an industry, we need to learn about them and not them about us. I think financial confidence or confidence is a big thing. And so when I tend to talk about that, I use a different word, but I mean the same thing, which is about building financial confidence. I'm going to talk about something that we did that we learned an awful lot from so we learned very quickly that people did believe they knew how to talk to a financial advisor because they, at some level, from friends or whatever, they'd sort of experienced it. So we found a lot of people coming to talk to us, and they would say things, well, I want flexibility, I want, this, that, and then I'm sat there thinking, you wouldn't use those terms in real life, because I don't. And certainly not before I was in this industry, I bloody didn't use them, right? So we brought in something called Who Am I? And we actually expected to get a lot more pushback on that we got. And we asked people just 5 key questions. What's your plan? What's in it for you? What might go wrong? How would you spot it? What would you do about it? And you get some answers which go from the sublime to the ridiculous. We had one chap who turned around and said, nothing else can go wrong. My wife just died, right? I'm now dealing with a vulnerable person, by the way, in that circumstance. We had another chap on this, what would you do about it? Because he was looking to maximize benefits on death, who basically said, well, unless you can bring me back to life and start me breathing again, nothing. Right, which I thought was funny, but it was offhand at the same time. Now, what that's really about is it's asking some key questions. Most people have a plan, most people know what's in it for them, and then it gets a little bit more complicated. But what we're really learning there is how they talk, right? What are the things that they say? What are their go-to phrases? What are the things that they would naturally... So what we're doing with that is we're taking their language and we're actually going to start passing it back to them, right? And the more we pass it back to them, the more of their language comes out. And we learned some other stuff as well, which I would have thought we'd have always known. If you go into a social environment and you turn around and ask people about what they earn and where they spend their money and that, they'll wander off, right? They won't want to talk to you because it's personal, right? If you ask them about a partner, family, loved ones, you can't shut them up. They're worse than me, right? They just keep going. And so that a lot of the things that we're learning in there are around tapping into people's emotions, because emotions drive decisions, whether the FCA like it, whether anybody believes it or not. Emotions drive decisions, right? And so if you can tap into those, and then you can understand how people have made decisions throughout their life, whether they've actively or implicitly made those decisions, then what you're in a position to do is to actually talk to them. And for the first time on Trustpilot just last week, we had a lady refer to the written statement that she had to make. So whenever anybody comes in to our business, they have to do this, who am I? And before they can transact, they have to do it again so that we can identify that they know what the plan is and why they're doing it. And importantly, they know where the risks are, how those risks will emerge, and then what they'll do about it. And for us, that became incredibly important. And it's actually driven, we get on average around 200 contacts a month from people who are now starting to talk to us and open up to us. And we actively want to share this. Some people turn around and say it's IP. Is it hell? Right? Anybody could think of it, but actually it's really helpful, and it helps people to talk to us. And fundamentally, whether it be any of the questions that's on here, which Steve started and I joined in on, right? Fundamentally, it doesn't matter how old you are, or what stage of life you are, right? The first ability to get help is to feel like you're comfortable talking to the person who's coming back at you, right? And that they understand what you need and how you talk. If you get round that, right, then you can't stop them. And actually, you can, one of the most rewarding parts of the job that I do is when the guys that work with us actually get positive feedback. And the most positive feedback we got is, you listened. That's the most positive feedback we get now. You listened, right? Should that really be feedback that I should be surprised at? I don't think so. Ball back to you, Henry.
We're all listening. But no, I do hear what you're saying. But I have a slight caveat here. That if you're saying the way to get a client to do what you want to do is to get on their emotional wavelength, empathy, and all that stuff, that's great. But it's also how scammers do things. They are actually very good at getting inside our heads, getting our trusts and whatever. There has to be more than that, doesn't there? How do we create not just trust in us, but trust which effectively changes things for the good, Henry, rather than the bad?
Yeah. What a delicious question, because you're quite right. The best communicators, without a doubt, are scammers, because what they do is they get into your emotions, they listen to you, they take the bias, and then they act on it, right? Yeah, of course you can do that. You want your pension benefits before 55 and you don't want to pay tax, crack on. I'm your man, I'm your lady, whatever that is. And it's awful. And I think particularly Margaret Snowden and the scams group, they do a lot around that. Sometimes it's not telling people what they want to hear, but what they need to hear. That is the hard bit of the job, right? The bit at that moment where you turn around and say, but what about? What if? I've seen that done very well, and I've seen it done very badly. I've seen, almost people kind of, to paraphrase, saying, do you even know what you're talking about? Because that's offensive, right? And you can't do that. But other people I would say, well, what happened if? Or what about this? Or what about this option? So the key issue here, and I think this is a one that the FCA don't spend enough time focusing on, but they do say it regularly, just not strongly enough for me, is the point of interaction where you turn around and give somebody a quick challenge, a nudge that says, and actually, Henry, when we go back to this boundaries paper, this is the bit that in our consultation, we'll go back and say that is missing, because a challenge can exist without necessarily delivering a personal recommendation, right? A personal recommendation is, for me, the hard edge of the boundary. It is not the obligation of the advisor. That is to create an informed choice, and Consumer Duty is very clear on that, right? But a personal recommendation is a very clear boundary. So it is, for me, possible in a support framework, and I do believe we have a big occupational sector who can be major in this, including master trusts, is the ability to say to somebody, but have you thought what if? Right? Because a challenge is not a personal recommendation. A challenge is an invitation to think it through for yourself. It's a fairly small group here this morning, 26 people I can see. How many people on this group have bought a house over their lifetime? Is there a way of measuring that? Yeah, it'd be most of it, right? Yeah, I've bought 3 houses, right? Anyone want to ask me if it's possible for me to know how to build a house and take it back apart and put it back together again, right? It's absolutely impossible. I've no bloody idea, right? But funnily enough, I've managed to buy 3 houses and I ain't done too badly out of it. Could I have done it better? I'm pretty sure I could. Could I have done it worse? I'm pretty sure I could. I could do it worse, but I made decisions and I made the most important financial decisions in my life. There's nothing that I've got in savings that is bigger than the value in my house, right? And we've done that. Now, is it possible for somebody to have said to me at some point, hey, Simon, have you had a survey? Did it tell you anything? You know, did it tell you enough? Have you thought about it? Hell yeah. And is it possible for somebody at First Actuarial or Teachers' Pensions or wherever to turn around to somebody and say, you know what? Have you thought about this? Because we often see this as being a challenge for somebody, right? Why can't we do that? Why does that have to be regulated? There are so many people in our industry that have the opportunity to help. We need to arm them. What we spend our time doing is disarming them and making them believe that they can't help people or scaring the hell out of them if they help people. And that consequently causes disengagement. So for me, it's about the occupational sector, the financial advice sector, the financial services sector, the master trusts, all of those, all saying it really doesn't matter which part of the industry we work in. We all actually do the same thing. We care for people, we help people, and if we work together, we can find a way to communicate with people. But we've got to start from there. And for me, that's the bit. You know, I love the question: could you be a scammer? Hell yes, right? The test is don't just play to people's bias. Help them.
Okay, proof of the pudding and all that.
Yes.
Anyone got any questions at this stage? I see people sort of like engaging, thinking. Can we throw the conversation out to a wider group than the small group who've contributed so far? Okay, well, I'll move on then. I'll move on unless somebody puts their hands up in the next couple of seconds.
Catherine's got a question.
Catherine, not yet.
It was only a matter of time before I formulated a question. I'm still formulating it, to be honest. I'm finding this extremely interesting.
Okay.
For people who don't know me, I work as I'm an actuary, I'm a scheme actuary. I'm also involved in financial well-being, etc., etc. So much of what's being talked about, it just I hate the word, but it resonates enormously. But I feel that people need understanding at a really base level before they can engage in anything. And I think that's where the real sort of harmony between everybody here probably exists, in that getting people to a position where they understand even the most base level of my area's pensions, you know, as I'm sure everybody else is involved. If they can understand at the basic level how pensions work, they're going to be much more receptive to understanding the choices that they have, maybe not being able to make them, but what they are, when they may need financial advice, regulated financial advice, when a bit more understanding would help, what questions to ask, and just being open-minded to the whole thing. And I think that is where, sorry, it's not a question, it's a statement, but I'm interested in your thoughts. I just feel that this is where we all work together with that objective.
I love the concept. We all work together. I'm going to give you an example of something. So the most complicated piece of advice that we can give in a regulatory sense is somebody that's considering giving up guarantees, right? And it may well be, you know, so you're already working against a clock there because somebody gets, for example, a transfer value and then they're working against a 3-month clock, right? And trying to say to them, it doesn't matter if it goes up or down, it's more important to make the right decision, doesn't work, right? No, I've got a clock, I've got to beat the clock, right? And so you, in theory, have a maximum in that period of 3 months to get a level of understanding to them. Now, if you work really hard with them, you might get them to a certain level and you might be able to turn around and say, hey, you know, running a race against the DB scheme is the equivalent of racing against the Olympic champion and giving them a 30-meter head start. Do you really want to do that? right? Or it's the equivalent to taking a car off the forecourt. The minute you've took it off, you've lost 30% or 40% of its value. Where do you think you're going to get it back from, right? So just don't do it is a good start point. But there are people that, in my experience, it's not the people that have choice, it's the people that have no choice that do things differently. Right? Because having a conversation with somebody and saying, my advice is to absolutely be poor tomorrow, they're going to find that unacceptable. Okay, so we've got all of that going on. So we get a period of, say, 12 weeks to try and get a level of understanding into them. And we're never going to do that, right? I've done this 33 years, and I can tell you now, the thing that happens to me every day is I meet somebody who knows more than me. Right? So the idea that in that period of time, I can create somebody who's not only going to be an expert, is going to stay an expert, not happening, right? So that switches the obligation, it reframes it. I suddenly have to become an expert in them, right? It's no good me giving them a plan which represents my values and my knowledge, because the first day that I'm not in their pocket 24/7, right, they'll make a decision, perhaps without even realizing it, because they're implicit decision-making machines, and it'll go wrong and they won't have a Scooby, right? The reason the British Steel people figured out that something was wrong, because somebody identified it for them, right? Not because they figured it for themselves, right? And that's a danger, isn't it? So in that environment, I always look at it and say, right, when you're in your rocking chair and you're looking backwards on your life, are you going to sit there and think, I made a pretty good decision on that DB scheme, or I made a pretty good decision on that investment? Hey, hell, right? You're going to look back and say, did I live my life broadly in line with the values that I had, and did I help the people who I loved, right? None of that comes into it, right? So again, you know, this understanding starts with respect. And the first thing I would say is that the vast majority of people that we meet have left education at whatever level, got a job, perhaps more than one. Getting a job's not easy. Keeping it's even harder. You don't set your alarm clock, you don't turn in, you don't do your job, you get fired, and it's harder to get another one, right? They've had relationships, perhaps more than one. In my world, relationships are just about the hardest thing you can do, right? You can never get it right, no matter how hard you try, right? And you know, as a Northeast bloke, there's so many sins that I commit by accident, I can't even count them, right? From that sort of sense. They've bought houses, they've bought cars, other big ticket items. In certain areas, buying a washing machine's a challenge, you know, because you haven't got that spare cash, right? And they've done all of that. And actually, I think we need to, first of all, start off from respecting them from that and understanding they've done it. And also, and almost saying to them, we know you do all of these things, right? And we know you've done it yourself. Well done. But if it's actually, if you're feeling a little bit unsafe or unsure, we can help you. And we want to, because we care, right? So sometimes we just get a little bit too granular and a little bit too focused on the detail. And I'm going to come back and say, I did something with Darren Philp lately, and I turned around and he said, and I asked everybody before I went, what industry do you work in? I'm an actuary, I'm a financial advisor, this, that, and the other. Bollocks, right? I work with people, and my job is to help people, right? Simple as, right? So I work in the people industry, right? And so everything that we're saying here, for me, if you want people to like you, be nice. If you want people to like you, respect them, give them respect, portray that respect, allow them to talk to you in a way that they feel comfortable talking to you. And more importantly, give a challenge where it's needed and allow it to evolve over time, because there's no chance of creating financial services or pensions experts, right? Not a chance, because they're experts in what they do every day and the people that they love. Right, we ain't making them experts. And I don't know who came first with the question, Chris or Ian. So I hope you were watching, Henry, because I wasn't.
Well, I mean, let's go to Ian now. I think you are two on my list after Catherine. But before we do, Catherine, was that a good answer to your question?
I very much enjoyed it. Thank you. Yes.
Diplomatic as ever. I might say Catherine and I have done a lot of work over the years on these questions. And she is a bit of a touchstone for me. So it's great to have you on the call, Catherine. So Ian, and it's great to have you on the call too.
Thank you, Henry. And first of all, can I ask the question, is it definitely Catherine? Because on your name, Catherine, it says Catherine Lockyer brackets unverified. I don't know if you're aware.
I've not been through a verification process, no, but it is me.
Yeah, I recognise it. It's just so really it was what you said that made me want to put my hand up. And I just want to give you a bit of an insight about what we did at Money Alive since 2018 about this basic education, which is we created a number of box sets on different topics which were aimed at consumer level education rather than professional level. And the box set we did on DB transfers, which is what Simon's been talking about, this foregoing a guaranteed income, actually lasts for 1 hour and 12 minutes. So when we first proposed it, we got kind of laughed at by a lot of companies, the idea that someone would watch something of that kind of duration. But we broke it into small chunks and we made it interactive. So when people complete our box sets, we give them the opportunity to complete a survey. And so far, we've had 14,500 responses to that survey. And 98% of people have valued access, and 94% of people have said it's helped them make a better financial decision. So I think we've got a unique data set there because nobody else does what we do. But the point is, if you do what you say, Catherine, which is talk to people about the basics, they value it and it does help them. And, you know, for £99 a month, people can license the Money Alive platform and it's got box sets on tons of content. But I think what you're saying absolutely works. The difficulty is offering it at a scale, really.
What percentage of the people who you sent that questionnaire to responded? Was that 98%, or are you saying 98% of the people responded?
Yeah, 98% of the people who responded. Of the 14,500 people who have completed the survey, which is voluntary. So that's obviously we can't give you data on the people who didn't respond, and maybe they all hated it. I don't know. Probably not, because most people don't do surveys as a rule.
No, I mean, it's a hell of a lot of people to respond to a survey. No,
I mean, it's incredible data, really, and as I say, it's unique to us. But I think, you know, there you go. That's an insight into what can be done to address Catherine's point about giving people basic information on what an annuity is and how they work, and joint life and foregoing guarantees and all this kind of stuff. And you know, their box set about DB talks about 30,000. If you've got more, you need to get the financial advice. This is what the process. It's just, I think it's kind of interesting, and it basically supports what Catherine said, really, that if we get the basics right, which is possible, then it makes a big difference to people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, Chris, you were going to come in, weren't you, with a couple? You got your hand up twice, Chris.
Why? I didn't realise. Both hands. Sorry. I was just. There's something that I kind of just niggles me a little bit in my head, and I'm not quite sure the answer to it. But we talk about sort of, and you said it quite well, Simon. Talk about consumers learning more about our business and learning more about the decisions. And I know when I go to a plumber because my water's fixed, I just want my water to be fixed. I don't care how it's done. I just want it done. And when I go because my car's not working, I want that to be fixed. I'm never going to know everything about cars. Yeah. And I'm in my head wondering what the difference is, and I'm just sort of wanting to make sure it's not us wanting to explain what we do to consumers for our benefit rather than explaining it for their benefit. And
Chris, thank you very much, because it's a wonderful way to put it. And the truth is this, right? When somebody comes to you and they want to talk about buying a house, right? They only want you as a tool to help them buy the house, because the buying the house is what's of their interest. When somebody comes to you to talk about retirement, they only want you as a tool to help organise the retirement. Retirement isn't about an annuity or a drawdown or a DB scheme or any of those bloody things, right? It's about, am I going to have enough money to do the things that I want? And if I'm not, what am I going to do about it? Right? So you're quite right. The thing that I found in this industry is I get to work with a lot of exceptional people. The challenge with exceptional people is either they don't know they're exceptional, right? Or they don't want to acknowledge they're exceptional. And the problem with being exceptional is you're an exception. You're an exception to the rule, right? And if you've got all this knowledge in your head, right, and you've learned it and you're really proud of it, try and stop it coming out of you. Right? It's coming out, right? It's coming up like a volcano sometimes, right? But actually, if the plumber tries telling you every single thing that he's doing, you just think, fix the flame and sink, mate, or the water, and get on with your job, right? And it's as simple as that. So what you've just said for me is important, right? The barrier to engagement is not the consumer for me. The barrier to engagement is us. Right. The reason that I in particular hope Martin Lewis would engage, and Catherine, there's a session coming up in late January with the Consumer Duty Alliance Task Force. I think I would love you to join if you didn't mind. And similarly, Ian, anybody else, right? But you know, the role that Henry described you as playing, Catherine, I think that would be really value for them and for you. The key here is I think sometimes when we're talking, someone needs to say to us, "What the hell did you just say? Please explain it in a way that a normal person or a regular person can understand, because we get into all of these kind of conversations and we understand each other. Well, I don't always understand some of these things that get thrown out there, but we understand each other. But we've actually put in place a barrier. So I think what you said there is important. What these people are actually interested in is what they want out of it. If we start to make it more complicated than that, then they don't get what they want. And if they don't get what they want, we ain't done our job properly, have we? Right? So I think that's a really key message you've given there, and something we should hold on to.
I think there is another difference as well, though. Oh, sorry, me.
I was going to say Catherine's still got her hand up, so I was going to come back to her. But if you want to jump in ahead, Ian, fine, go ahead, and then we'll come to Catherine. Yeah, that was Ian.
No, that was Chris.
I think it was Chris.
Go for it, Chris. Go for it.
I'm sorry, I've had my turn.
I was just going to say, I think the key difference I was thinking of with the decisions, because I'm thinking, are we just giving them information to benefit us? And I think the key difference in the decisions is, my water is going to be able to be fixed, and my car is going to be able to be fixed. The question that people retiring want answered is, can you make me retire comfortably and give me the lifestyle I want? Yeah. And it may be, for a lot of people, the answer is, well, no, but there are these things that you can do to mitigate it and get up here. And I think that's probably the key difference between those things. They do have to understand it so that they understand why they're getting to a compromise and how they get to the best compromise, rather than just sending someone away to choose and fix the problem effectively.
Yeah. One of the issues I did want to cover this, and we'll go to Catherine, is what people, the sort of people that we're seeing now that are starting to approach retirement and will approach retirement in the future. But I want to go to Catherine because she had a hand up and was really patient. So
yes, so thank you very much. I was responding to what Chris had said, and also your response, Simon, that I think it's a really good analogy to think about. You get a plumber in. I mean, at the minute, my outside gutter is leaking and I'm going to need to get somebody to do it. And it's really stressing me out. I hate it when something goes wrong with my house, but I know it will be fixed when I get the right person around. I know that if it's fixed now and it goes again in 6 months' time, I'll get somebody back in and it'll be done. There'll be repeated potential stress, hopefully short term, easily fixed. When you've got somebody with a financial concern, I don't think it has to be about a crisis. It can be about just a general level of, I don't feel like I understand my financial future. And that in itself is a stress that is ongoing. And you can take advice on something you should take advice on. A DB transfer is one example, but also formulating a retirement plan is another. And options, decumulation options, for example, perhaps I'm being a bit simplistic, but decumulation options, you need advice around that potentially. Once you've taken that advice, there's no going back. You can't really take that advice again and revisit it. I mean, again, I'm being simplistic, but I think that's where I think there's a difference. Repeated plumbing problems can be repeatedly fixed. Financial advice on certain aspects of your financial future, you don't get the opportunity to have another bite at the cherry. And therefore, it feels like that's a big difference that we need to help people get to a point when they can understand enough and feel comfortable enough taking the advice they need, knowing that it's a really important decision that they can't get fixed again next month. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does, and I wouldn't try and override any of that. And I actually think when we talk about this new environment that people are living in, it would be really useful to hear you interact on that as well, because I think we do need to move to that. But I'm aware John Hampton's got two hands up, and I don't think John's showing as well on the screen when he raises a question. So, John, can I bring you in there? You're on mute, John.
It only shows two hands when somebody else's hand was already up. I've worked that right. So, I think this is a bit like, the two big decisions in your life are what's all right in a will and taking the financial advice. And, I think when I listen to our members and they say, we tell them to shop around, get the right lawyer for you and all the rest of it. And they'll describe a case to them and they'll get three slightly different answers from the lawyers. Now, that's all right when you're writing a will, because that probably isn't as big a risk in people's heads as getting the right financial advisor. And I think that's the bit that is really hard for people who know they should be taking that step, but saying, well, actually, I've talked to company Y and they've said this, and company B have said that, and it's not just, I'd love it, Chris, to just be, I just want to live comfortably. But people live in a real world. They might have disabled kids and need to have a trust of some sort and all that type of stuff. So they're stressing over their own individual complicated situations, and they may not have the money to do all that. And I think that's the bit about saying, when people talk about financial advice, they see it very narrow about the assets, you know, the money they've got invested, all their savings, and a bit about the pension. But then, you know, how do you get to the point of saying that's the right advisor for me to cover all the things that I need to support my family and maybe my kids or whatever? So to me, that's the bit where they struggle to understand it, because they're all coming back saying, I don't know who to go to.
Yeah, John, I'll fire that question back at you. If you had 3 financial advisors or lawyers speaking to you, all giving you slightly different opinions, they were all at the same cost, so you had a flat choice, which one would you choose? On what basis?
Exactly, and that's the bit I don't know the answer to, even in my position.
There is an answer to it, by the way, irrespective of what industry you're dealing with. It's the one you trust the most. Which brings it back to Henry's point about the scammer and all of that sort of situation. So sometimes you might go on price if there's a massive differential and things like that. But more often than not, it's the one that you feel you can trust the most, which is where I talked about trust being given and not earned, and actually can be betrayed in certain circumstances. We've got 5 minutes left.
Could I just jump in here as the chair? I often asked, can you recommend a financial advisor? And I very often do recommend 3. And, you know, the number of times that I've actually recommended a financial advisor and it's worked out well, very, very few. Most of the time I get an awful lot of jip coming back to me saying that person didn't quote, that person, you know, gave me the wrong advice and all this stuff. So actually I'm very nervous about giving advice on advisors because there's nothing in it for me and there's an awful lot to go wrong. So it's kind of like, how do we create an environment where we even feel confident about our trusted advisors?
I'm going to be really blunt, Henry. Yeah. First of all, I absolutely agree with what you've said, and I've seen it countless times. And I think anybody that you asked who worked in our industry who'd taken that leap of faith and recommended go and speak to these 3, they're in a, you know, they would probably give the same sort of feedback that you have. There's nothing unfair there that I would even try and contradict in what you've said, right? But I'm going to go back to the same point that I've been making all the way through, really. We compartmentalize it, we segment it, right? Not the individual themselves. They're thinking, I've got a life to live and I've got these different things that I need to achieve. And then we suddenly break it down into mortgage, life insurance, wills, trusts, inheritance tax, you know, investing in this wonderful new thing, pensions, annuities, drawdowns, and the rest of it, right? These guys don't think like that. They don't think like that. They're thinking, I've got to get through this next stage. And actually, they might get things right. They might get things wrong. But what I've found with the best thing about people is their ingenuity and their ability to bounce back, right? Bounce back ability in that sort of sense. And they can make mistakes and they learn from them and they progress, right? So not everything's going to be perfect. And if we pretend it's going to be, all we're doing is setting ourselves up for a fall. So again, I would turn around and say, let's stop segmenting it, because I tell you now, if you buy a house rather than rent a house, and you've therefore got more money that you can save, in whatever that is, you're in a better position when you get down the line and you're thinking about retiring. And let's be quite clear on it. People that are looking at retiring in the future, you know, they can't look in a mirror and see the past. It's going to be very different, right? We got 3 minutes, and the truth of it is, the challenge we've got going forward is almost impossible to jump in one leap. And it's a very different challenge for people, because we're going to see a whole set of individuals getting less money from employers to save, not really knowing how to save it, not having enough money to do the things that they need to do, not being able to get on the housing market, not having confidence in the people that could help them, right? That it's almost gone from cradle to grave to the age of individual responsibility, right? People give you a little bit of money, particularly if they're forced to, right? But who's going to help you? If you were a trustee and you were helping look after a pension scheme, you had all of these advisors that would come in and help you at key moments, right? If you're an individual now and you go in the workplace and someone sticks you in a pension scheme, you might have a 50-year working life ahead of you, and it might be more important to, in actual fact, get a house or get some savings behind you, right? In the UK, on the Halifax survey, it costs you 15% less to buy a house now and get a mortgage than it does to rent, right? if you can get on the housing market, that's money back in your pocket later on, right? Do you really
Simon, we're coming to the end of our call. I really do want to just throw it and say we hear what you're saying, but 92% of people out there don't take advice and somehow seem to get by. The question is, would they get by easier if they'd taken advice, or are we in a situation where there is a small number of people who really need advice and a load of people who need things like targeted support, simplified advice and all that? You know, if I can ask you to sort of sum up what you've got to say, do we need more people taking advice, or do we just need a different type of advice to the people who don't take it at the moment?
My own view is you made the point, Henry, I don't think we can realistically say that there's a whole lot of people out there who need advice to get through life. Where's the evidence for that, right? But what I do think is that as an industry, we need to find a support framework that gives people confidence and financial confidence to do two things: to make decisions when they're comfortable making decisions, and to go and get help when they're not comfortable making decisions, right? And to make that work, we've got to give them respect. Hopefully that's a decent summary.
I think that's fine. That's great. And on that note, I think we've come to the end of our hour. I don't want anybody, especially those who have chargeable timesheets, and there are one or two of them on this call, to have to run past their 1 hour's worth of CPD. So thank you very much, Simon Chrystal. Big round of applause.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Okay.
Next week, I can happily say there is no pension playpen because it's a bank holiday. And happy Christmas to everybody. And let's hope that the people who have the best news at Christmas are the people who don't get bombed the shit out of in Gaza, because those people need a little bit of respite, and our thoughts are with them. Our thoughts as well are with those in Ukraine. Let's pray for peace in the East and pray for Gaza. And on that, have a very happy Christmas, everybody, and see you in the new year.
And thanks, everybody. Bye.